Manthan team for inviting me for the talk. I think the talk would be in English only.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And thank you, Ram, for the introduction. Yeah, I am basically an engineer. I did my electrical engineering from BIT Mesra, and then was working in Motorola Freescale Semiconductors for around 4 years as a VLSI design engineer, and then moved on to civil service as part of the interest in the social uh, activities. We used to teach some kids in a slum in Noida, and then it sort of, if you have to do this, why not get into the system and improve things within the system? And that was the reason to prepare for civil service, and then got into the service in 2012, Agmul Kader, and was part of the elections in 2013, 2014. Elections. One was the 13 Legislative Assembly elections of Delhi, and 2014 the elections, Lok Sabha elections, and then, of course, in Mizoram, the local elections, and then 2019 Lok Sabha elections again when I was district magistrate and also returning officer for the constituency Dadra Nagar Haveli. And after the elections, in fact, around to August in 2019, in fact, the way it was not exactly the abrogation, but the way in which the entire population was the rights of an entire population was shut down. I still believe that the decision can be anything, but in a democracy there are certain rights which are inalienable and which are ought to be protected irrespective of whatever is the decision that the government might be taking. And I felt at that point of time the executive has found a way to bypass the constitution, and without any constitutional requirement even for declaring an emergency, they went ahead and did a lot of things. I felt that was a wrong turn at that point of time, and it was not, I thought it was appropriate to take a decision to leave and raise my voice. But during this period when 2019 election, something else had also happened, and that was with respect to this EVM VVPAT. And while in service, also this issue was raised to the commission, both at the commission level and also at the CEO level, but not in writing. So if the question was like, why was these issues not raised while being in service? So these issues were raised. Okay, now coming to the topic that we have, that is on EVM and VVPAT. I have been a defender of EVM process till around 2017. If you go to my Twitter line, you'll find very detailed defense of why EVM is a better process than the ballot box or something else that we had before, and how EVMs cannot be hacked, and how it is a foolproof process. It is not just about the technology of the EVM, but also about the process security, the physical security, the administrative safeguards that are there around this EVM that makes it foolproof. And my position slightly changed in around 2019 when I was the RO and I had to attend the meeting that returning officers training in IIIDEM, that is in India International Institute for Election Democracy and Election Management, I think. And it was as part of the returning officers training in Delhi. That is when some disturbing questions came to my mind. I raised those questions. We'll be coming to those questions in this talk. So if we know the election, it started with each candidate having their own ballot boxes in the first election. So if we had 5 candidates, so each of them had their own ballot boxes to begin with. And then it changed, and they said, no, it's too much of a logistic nightmare. We'll have one ballot box, and then instead we'll give different ballot paper where you can have that simple marked and then put it in the ballot box. Then it changed to what we call as EVM, electronic voting machine. It was tried somewhere in the 80s in Kerala, and then later became full-fledged. Then we came to VVPAT some around 2013. So our election processes have evolved. It is not that it has always been the same. And these evolutions or changes in the election process have come because people have questioned the issues that are facing the current process. So when you are questioning the existing process, please don't take it as, the entire elections beforehand as it should be declared as null and void. No, that is not the purpose. The purpose is to evolve. If every time we had a change in the election process or the process through which the election is conducted, we are going to decide all the elections that are conducted before that change as void, then we wouldn't be here. It's not possible. So any change, any suggestion, any questions should be considered as a process for improvement towards a better model, rather than as a conspiracy to say that all the elections that conducted before were actually not correct or invalid. Now coming to the EVM part, but so electronic voting machines have been there for a long time now, and a lot of elections, both national and legislative assembly elections, have been conducted with EVMs. I've also been part of EVM based elections in 2013, 2014, and it was based on those experience only I have defended that process till 2017. Why I used to defend EVM? Because there are a few things that the commission had drilled in our mind, not only in the population's mind, also in the officers' mind who are conducting elections. One is that EVMs are standalone devices. EVMs are standalone devices which are not connected to any external device. And in fact, the initial arguments, if you look at the presentations from the Election Commission, you will find that it says that the ballot unit and control unit can only talk to each other. It cannot talk to any other third device. And that is, so that they cannot have a third thing connected to it. So the BU and the CU, the ballot unit, wherein the candidate names are there, and the control unit, where the votes are registered, are recorded and stored, were supposed to be a standalone unit, not to be connected to anything else. And if at all it is connected or attempt to be connected, there should be a fail safe that should happen at that point of time. So EVM was a standalone device. That was the first thing. Unconnected, not network device. A second thing was that uh, beyond this was the technological part. And also in the technological part, they said it is a very rudimentary device. It is like a calculator. So you can't hack a calculator, right? So it is like a calculator in which you press 1 plus 2 is equal to 3, it will come. You can't do anything much. It's a very rudimentary device which does not have a computer-like processor. It cannot be connected. So all those things. So this is a very simple example which got conveyed that it is like a calculator, and a standalone unconnected rudimentary calculator which just counts every time a signal comes. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, it counts. That's all. So a rudimentary calculator, unconnected standalone calculator. That was the kind of analogy that was given to an EVM to prove that it is technologically not. It was also said it does not have any programmable memory. It's a one-time programmable device. We cannot program it anything, beyond that, what is there. So that part was the technological aspect of it. Second part which was said was about the physical security aspect. Because when people asked, people raised this question that even a calculator can be hacked provided I have a physical access to it. If I'm able to open it, if I'm able to connect something to it, I can change something, I can do a program rewrite. So many things can happen provided I have a physical access to it. So the commission said, no, EVMs are one of the most physically secure device that we have, and it is secured through a lot of process and procedures. It is kept only with the police guard, with CCTV, in the administrative machinery of the district magistrates. And even when a strong room is opened, all the political party representatives are called. When it is to be dispatched, again, all those security precautions are taken. It is never connected, it is never unguarded, left unguarded or connected anywhere else. It is a very physical sanctity is ensured, that it is not tampered with. Nobody is connecting anything to it. It is not a network device, and now it is not to be connected to anything also. Physical sanctity is also ensured. So this part was the physical security argument that came in. The third part of it was which was more important, was the process security aspect. Process security aspect or administrative safeguards which are there. Because people ask this question, see, the calculators or the EVMs that you have are under physical security or this tight scrutiny of political parties, candidates, etc., only when it reaches your reaches the districts or where the elections are conducting. Something can happen when it is done, when it is manufactured itself. You don't know what happened there. Something can happen when it is brought from the manufacturing site to the district. So on what basis are you saying that all these are secure? Because your major focus on security is when the EVMs reach the districts, or which is with once the election process starts. So therein the commission had an elaborate process security argument that was put in, which said that even if, let's say, something of this happens, if at all any tampering is attempted, we should be able to catch it through a process which does not require any kind of technical scrutiny. We should be able to look at it. We should be able to do certain processes and see whether something of this sort has been happened. And the process security aspect had 2 or 3 key aspects to it. First one was that, and most important one, was that EVMs are candidate agnostic. Candidate agnostic in the sense it doesn't know which candidate is at which number. EVMs don't know the candidate names or which party the candidate belongs to, nothing. EVMs just know that there is candidate 1 and candidate 1 got so many votes, candidate 2 got so many votes, candidate 3 got so many votes. Now, if the EVM as an electronic machine does not know who is candidate 1, who is candidate 2, who is candidate 3, a pre-programmed manipulation is not possible, because you don't know, you can, it can be a randomized thing. Okay, let 1 go to 3, but if you don't know who is 1 and who is 3, it is not leading to any meaningful tampering or any meaningful manipulation. This was because the EVMs are brought in, and it is kept in the custody of the district much before the election starts, and the candidates are finalized, candidate names, their symbols, etc., are only finalized after the nomination withdrawal scrutiny process, after the nomination scrutiny and withdrawal process. That is normally around 2 to 3 weeks before the election date. So elections are announced usually around 2 months before the poll date, or 45 days around that. Then various push and pull and whatever happens in the national parties, the regional parties, the independents. Then a candidate is finalized for that particular constituency. Then those candidates file the nomination papers during that nomination window. Then there is a scrutiny of those nomination papers, and if some are not in order, it is rejected. Then there is an option for withdrawal for people if they don't want to contest. And after all that, then we have what is known as a symbol allotment process, because a lot of independent candidates are also there. They all fight for the same kind of symbols. National party symbols are known, regional party symbols are known, but unregistered, there's registered party but not recognized, and independents, etc., are there. Their symbols are not known. They ask for various free symbols available, and there is a symbol allotment process. And then the process is called as a sequencing, where we publish the sequence of the candidates in what is known as a Form 7A. This is a very important process, because that is the first time that we come to know that candidate 1 is so and so, candidate 2 is so and so, candidate 3 is so and so. Till then, we don't know who is candidate 1, who is candidate 2, candidate 3. So this candidate finalization and publication of Form 7A happens around 15 to 20 days before the poll date. By the time all the EVMs are there and it is all strongly secured, it all kept with CCTV, security, paramilitary guard, machine guns, and whatever. Now, at this stage, the normal candidate sequencing is done on national parties, and the state parties are given the first preference. But even within that, it will be based on the alphabet of the candidate. So let's say Congress and a BJP have a name. One has a name starting with A, and the other has a name starting with B. Assuming English is what we are going through here, then the A would come in the first number, and the B would come in the second number. Then the regional parties and that national, state, and independence would come in that order. So within that, there is a alphabetical arrangement also. So there is some sort of a randomization that is happening there based on the candidate names, because you don't know who is the candidate. So it is very tough to pre-program the device to do any meaningful manipulation before, because when it comes, it can, by the time the candidate is finalized, it can go anywhere. So the first defense on the process security was the candidate agnostic. And then how do the voter know that I am going to candidate 1 is, let's say, Congress, and candidate 2 is BJP, candidate 3 is TDP or something? Okay, how do I know that? Because on the ballot unit, just on the side of those buttons, there are blue buttons. Side of those buttons, a paper is pasted. A ballot paper is pasted, and on that paper, it is written. That process also is very important. That Form 7A, where is a sequence of the candidates along with their symbols, standardized symbols, are pasted on the ballot unit. And that is where, when the voter goes there, when he's seeing a button, towards the left of it, you will find that button corresponds to so and so candidate with so and so symbol. So that is not electronic. That is a very simple manual pasting of paper on top of the ballot unit, which is done. Similarly, at the time of counting, when you take the control, the CU, and when you press the result, what happens is it says candidate 1, so many votes, candidate 2, so many votes. It doesn't say which name, so many votes, which name, no. It just says candidate 1, so many votes, candidate 2, so many votes. And since we know already from the Form 7A that candidate 1 is X and candidate Y is, 2 is Y, you tally it manually and then you put it out in the public domain. So machine is electronically, as a system, as an electronic system, was, and this is pre-VVPAT, the entire exercise what I'm talking about is pre-VVPAT, was electronically unaware of the candidate name, their sequence, their symbols, nothing. For it, it was just candidate 1, candidate 2, random. It could be used anywhere. It will just come candidate 1, 2, 3. It wouldn't matter at all. The second part of the process security argument was what was called as randomization. Now, randomization meant you don't know where this EVM is going to go. When it comes to a district, there could be 4 MLA constituencies there. I was in Aizawl, where we had 14 MLA constituencies in the district. So we don't know, when it comes to the district, the EVMs have come to the district, we don't know where this EVM is going to end up, which constituency the EVM is going to end up in, because it is done through a process what is known as randomization. The first randomization happens quite early, once it reaches during as part of the FLC. And the second randomization happens after this stage, as what is known as candidate finalization is done. The Form 7A is done. Immediately after that, during the commissioning of the EVM, a second randomization is done, wherein you decide the EVM will go to which polling booth. So 2-stage randomization. The first randomization is where we decide which assembly constituency this EVM will go. When I'm saying EVM, ballot unit and control unit. Okay. So serial numbers are there for each ballot unit, serial numbers are there for each control unit. So one serial number of a BU and a serial number of CU are assigned as, okay, this will go to the particular constituency. And then during the second randomization, which happens during the commissioning, what we do is that we club this BU and CU into one EVM. Okay, random serial number of BU and random serial number of CU will come together as one EVM. And then we also assign this to a particular polling booth. So we don't know initially which assembly constituency it is going, and till the date of commissioning, we also don't know to which polling booth it is going. So if you don't know the candidate names and their sequence, an intelligent manipulation is not possible. If you don't know which booth or which constituency the EVM is going, a targeted manipulation is also not possible. Let's say I do want to manipulate only in one booth where I know that particular my opponent is going to win, or he might have an advantage. I don't want to manipulate in all the booths. That will be stupid. So you want to do a targeted manipulation, but even that is randomized. That process is randomized. So you don't know till that 15 days before the poll date that which EVM is going to which polling booth. So that is the second part. First was the candidate agnostic part. The second part was the randomization part, randomization of the EVMs. Now the third part of which is called the mock poll, which is what the most political parties would base their trust on. It is not on randomization or the candidate agnostic and all those things. Mostly they would come on during the mock polls and they will try it themselves and say, yes, it is working fine. So mock polls there are 3 parts to mock polls. The first one was during FLC, which is usually done before the election is announced itself. In the first level check, the engineers from BEL, ECIL, etc. would come. They will test all this, whether the machines are working physically, etc. And in their presence itself, where the political party representatives are also invited, they are to put, 1%, 2%, 2% division is there. 1,200 votes, 1,000 votes, and 500 votes are cast. And then the results are checked that, okay, I have put for so many number of votes for a particular candidate. When I check my result, it is coming as that only or not. So basically, you are just trying to see whether if I am to put my vote, it is going to the right person or not. That is the first mock poll that is done. That is in the FLC, but that is done much before even the elections. And normally, it is preferred to be done before the elections are announced. The second mock poll is done after the commissioning, wherein I said the Form 7A is finalized, and during when we paste that Form 7A or the ballot paper onto the ballot unit, after that is done, then we actually do a second mock poll. The first mock poll during FLC is done with the dummy candidates, alpha, beta, gamma, etc. This is the first time after during the commissioning or after Form 7A is published and the pasting of the ballot paper onto the BU is done. During that process is called as commissioning of EVMs. And during the commissioning, what we do is we do a mock poll there also. We take randomly 5% of the EVMs and then do 1,000 vote cast on it with the political representatives, and we verify whether it is coming correct or not. If something is not coming correct, there we had an issue, because if something is not coming correct, we would just remove that EVM and we take another. So it is not right to say it as a random 5%. It is better to say it as a search for a 5% correct EVMs, because ideally, if you take 5% and one has gone wrong, you should assume that the sampling, the way you have done the sampling, that should be 20% of the EVMs have a chance of going wrong if you have taken 5. But that is not what we do. we do is that we take, if something is wrong, we just remove it and take another one and then complete that 5%. So this is the second time the mock poll is done, wherein actual candidates, their representatives are present, and this gives a lot of confidence to the candidates that everything is working fine. And then on the day of poll, till now it is only 5% of EVMs which are done. On the day of poll, all the EVMs are, in all the EVMs, in all the booths, at least 50 votes are cast by the polling agents which are there, in the presence of the polling agents which are there, and they can also cast, and it is verified whether it is working or not. So these three stages of mock polls are there. This is what the pre-EVM physical, technological, administrative safeguards are supposed to be. We had a rudimentary device, standalone device, unconnected, which is like a calculator as a EVM, and one-time programmable device. Second, we had a physical security, which will not allow anybody to physically touch, the EVMs, because it is, say, always kept in a secured environment. Third, we had a process security or safeguard arguments, wherein three aspects came in: candidate agnostic nature, randomization, two-stage randomization, and three stages of mock polls. So this was the elaborate arrangements on which the commission itself, said EVMs are tamper-proof. If at all anything happens, we will be able to catch it at one or this stage. And since it is, this that has not happened, nothing can happen here. And this is also drilled in to all of us, officers, and we used to use this to counter anybody who asked questions on EVM, who had theories of EVM hacking being happening. Now, it was in this context that 2019 was the first general elections, Lok Sabha elections, wherein VVPATs were introduced, the first time. Now, VVPAT was introduced. There is a history to how VVPATs were introduced. But the issue with this EVM process was, it was heavily dependent on the trust factor. That because all this is done by the election machinery, like a district election machinery, and people are supposed to trust, okay, yeah, everything is fine. So it is a trust-based election. There is a lot of trust kept in. A voter, there is no transparency to the voter. So the voter is pressing a particular button, a blue button. He or she has to believe that it is going to the right candidate. So means there is no way he or she can check it, whether it is actually going to that particular candidate or not. He or she has to believe that since somebody else has tested this machine, somebody else has done all these efforts to ensure that this is not tampered, he should be he should be convinced that this should be going there. So this is a trust based. It's not a verified. The person is just doing it. One of the principles in electronic voting or any election is that it should be cast as intended. If I cast a vote, it should be as per my intention. It should be recorded as casted. Means if it is stored somewhere, if the vote is stored somewhere, it should be recorded as cast, and it should be counted as recorded. When you take it up and then you start counting these votes, it should be counted as recorded. So there are the three aspects: from cast as intended, recorded as cast, and counted as recorded. So these three things come in. Now, when a principle like this is applied to a pre-VVPAT based process, the voter has no way to ensure that I am, my cast as intended is happening, because she can't see what is the vote that is going. And then at this point of time, there are a lot of litigations that happened, a lot of lobbying that happened with Election Commission by various political parties, that there needs to be there needs to be more transparency. It was around 2013, and when this happened, in 2013, 14, 15, then Supreme Court came up a direction that all the EVMs should have VVPAT and all elections should be 100% on VVPAT. And then that is how we moved to the VVPAT scenario. VVPAT is very important part of any elections because it adds to the transparency part. It adds to the transparency to the voter, and it also was introduced as, how do I know whether I am pressing 1, then the vote is also going to the 1? How do I know that? So VVPAT gave us a solution. If you are pressing 1, then that particular candidate's name and symbol will get printed, and you will be able to see that. Yes, so that this is what this is what you voted for. And so that gives a satisfaction. Yes, correct. I pressed for 1, and the 1 is, let's say, X party Y candidate. So my symbol is of X and the name is of Y. I'm fine. So everything is fine. So VVPAT gave us that information to us. Now, so this was 2019 was my first elections with the VVPAT. When I went to Delhi for the training, returning officers training, in the training, casually it was said that the VVPAT would print the name and symbols of the candidate. When the name and symbol of the candidate would be printed. So the question that came in was, how does the VVPAT know what is the name and symbol of the candidate? How does the VVPAT know? Because EVMs were supposed to be candidate agnostic. It was also supposed to be standalone. It was also supposed to be unconnected to any other device, right? If a standalone machine, a candidate agnostic machine, not connected to any network, how does it know the name and symbol of the candidate? And the name and symbol of the candidate is known only some 15 days before the elections. Even the parties don't know who is going to be their candidate in that constituency. So it is not possible to pre-program it. It is not possible that you have a data that is there coming in before or something in the. And if it is not pre-programmed, it has to be uploaded. It is not possible for you to write your name and symbol to a EVM unless it is, something is connected to it and something is uploaded to it. So the natural question, so I remember asking this question, that how is it then loaded onto this VVPAT EVM? Because now a VVPAT has come. How is it loaded onto the VVPAT? So the immediate reply was that the engineers of Bell, or the staff, basically it could be engineers, it could be other staff, temporary staff, whoever be it, might come and they will upload it. So the question is, how can you upload it if it is not connected? If it is a standalone device, how can it be connected? How can it be this name and symbol be loaded onto this? So the assumption was it is an unconnected, non-networked standalone device will have to be questioned. Okay, then I did not get any positive answer. In fact, the precise answer that I got was that as a district magistrate, you are supposed to build confidence in the public, not raise doubts, about EVM. So I was told that I am not doing the right job and I should be building more confidence about the EVM rather than raising these questions, which is, I think, which is very close to the election. So I also, I asked quite a few times there, and then I left. Then when I came back and the commissioning was going on during our elections, I was particularly curious to know how this EVM now setup is happening, the ballot unit, where VVPAT EVM setup is happening. Then I realized that
it's 11 o'clock.
The ballot unit, which used to directly send the vote to the control unit earlier, it's no more the case. Now there is a ballot unit, then there is a VVPAT, and then there is a CU. So if you're looking at from a vote flow, when you press a vote, how does it go? First, you are pressing it on the ballot unit. The ballot unit sends that vote to the VVPAT, which is sitting in the middle, and the VVPAT sends that vote to the control unit, which is recording that. Okay. So it is going now, the vote is going not from BU to CU directly. The vote is now going from BU to VVPAT and from VVPAT to CU. Okay. So this was observed at that point. Then it was also observed that for loading what you call as this symbols and names, symbol loading onto the VVPAT, we have to now load the symbol to the VVPAT. What it is done is the staff, the technical staff, who are coming a day or two before the commissioning, they come from outside. They bring the laptops, and they bring their laptops and some devices known as symbol loading units, SLUs. And they use the laptop to connect to internet to the election commission server and download what is known as symbol loading application, SLA. Okay. And then either use that or they might be installing it in the laptop in some other way. Then they generate what is called as a VVPAT sheet. VVPAT sheet is a sheet in where you have the names and symbols and the sequence, the number that is given. Because if you look at a VVPAT slip at any point of time, after this talk, I would request to just search VVPAT slips. You will find that there will be a number, there will be a name, and there will be a symbol. And that should have actually got all of us to ask this question. How does the EVM know the candidate name, symbol, if EVMs are unconnected standalone devices. At some point it had to be informed, but we did not ask that question. How it is still be unconnected? It can claim to be unconnected. What they do is they use the laptop, download the SLA or either install it somewhere else, then create a VVPAT sheet, then use those laptops to connect it to what you call a symbol loading units and download them into the symbol loading units using a SLA, symbol loading application. Then use those symbol loading units to connect to each and every VVPAT, okay, and upload this information to it. It is physically connected. It is not, there is a serial 9-pin cable that is used, and it is through a serial port. It is connected, and this data is uploaded onto the VVPAT. Now, two things came in. Your vote is going from BU to VVPAT, and then from VVPAT to CU. So, technically speaking, your vote is now being cast by VVPAT, not by BU. Okay, the BU is the place where you press the button, where the voter is pressing the button. But now that vote is from BU going to the VVPAT. And VVPAT is the one which is sending the symbol. What is happening inside, we don't know, because the commission has made none of the designs transparent. So all of us can do only a black box analysis unless somebody comes out and says this is a transparent design. Now, vote goes from BU to VVPAT and from VVPAT to control unit. So vote is essentially cast by VVPAT. It's not cast by the BU. Now, the same VVPAT is also connected to an external device, which is called as an SLU, which was earlier connected to a laptop, which was connected to an internet through get information from the server. It's like having a USB, which is you're connecting it to a computer, and the same USB is used to connect to another computer, which is connected to a network. And there is no now point saying that it is not connected. You are connected, you are networked. The moment you are connecting to an external device, be it any device, it becomes a network device. If two active devices gets connected, it is networked. And here there are more than two active devices involved. And so the first argument of the commission that EVMs are standalone, unconnected, non-network device is now out of the window after the introduction of VVPAT. It is now a connected device. It is connected before every election. Every single election it is connected. And a data transfer also happens. Second part, that it was said to be a rudimentary device, the technological argument. It is no more a rudimentary device. You are having a programmable memory where you are saving the name and symbol is a picture to there. You have a device which has a printer. You have a device, because that is what is printing your thermal paper as coming as VVPAT slip. You have a device which has an IO port, which is able to do this data transfer. You have a device which is having a sensor. It cuts and then it gives the data to the VVPAT. You have a count. So VVPAT, in a way, if it had a monitor, it would be a computer. It has everything else there in the VVPAT. Now it is not a rudimentary device anymore. It is not a standalone device anymore. It is not a rudimentary device anymore. It is also not a one-time programmable. In a way, we don't know what could be the inside. But the point is, right now we are able to do free data transfer to it. We are able to read and write candidate names and symbols every single time, and into the VVPAT. So that technological argument is now suddenly gone after the introduction of VVPAT. The second part was the physical security argument, wherein we were saying that it is kept in custody. We are not allowing it to touch anybody. That is also gone, because in your own presence, in the district official's presence itself, we are letting this VVPAT be connected to an external device through a serial cable. Once you allow a USB to be connected to your laptop, there is no point in saying that it is physically secure, because in your presence itself, you have connected that. You have connected another device to it. The physical security argument, once it is connected, it is complete. After that, you keep machine guns and tanks outside of strong room. It doesn't help. It is already connected. You have a external device connected to it. Then we have what you call as a three process of this process security argument. If you remember, the first one was candidate agnostic nature, which is not the case anymore, because VVPAT knows the name and sequence of the candidates. That is how it is able to print. When you are pressing button 1, the pre-VVPAT EVM did not know who was button 1. It had no idea. For it was only candidate 1. Now, when you're pressing button 1, the VVPAT is giving you the printout which has the name and the symbol printed. Unless it knows that 1 it corresponds to X and X candidate and Y party and the symbol, it will not be able to give that. So the machine as a whole now is no more candidate agnostic. It knows the candidate. It knows the candidate sequence: 1, 2, 3, 4. Who is candidate 1? Who is candidate 2? And that is electronically stored. So if I have a program which is which is able to look at a pattern, okay, go to the symbol and check the pattern. Okay, X, let's say lotus or a hand or some kind of a symbol, because it is standard symbols. These are not any random symbols, very standardized symbols across the countries. The same standardized symbols are used, be it free symbols or be it assigned symbols. You can easily do a pattern reading and find out that which party this particular vote is going to, or which candidate this is going to. Even a pre-programmed, I'm saying, it doesn't even require a post-program connection, because now the machine is candidate aware, which shouldn't have been the case. Now the machine is candidate aware. Again, the second part of the process security argument that we had was the randomization part, two-stage randomization. The first stage randomization, which is FLC, which is done along with the first level check, is done before the elections are announced. The second randomization that is done immediately after the Form 7A. If you remember, Form 7A is where the sequence of the candidates and the symbols are published, is done immediately, in fact, along with or immediately after the Form 7A is published. So by the time we are connecting the VVPAT to this symbol loading unit, or we are connecting this to the laptop, to the symbol loading unit, to the VVPAT, we already know which constituency and which booth this particular VVPAT is going, or VVPAT and EVM is going, because now VVPAT is already connected to VVPAT, EVM, BU and CU. So it's EVM is a one composite machine. So when we are connecting an external device to this EVM now, we already know at that point of time which booth this particular EVM is going to go. That information is already aware. So both the stages of randomization is now useless. It is like you doing a full scan of your computer and then connecting it to an internet. So the previous scan which we did is completely useless now. We are already now connected. We need to do a rescan, but that is not the case. We are connecting after this full knowledge. And this is very, I found it extremely dangerous, because targeted manipulation is much more of a concern, and it need not be even a transfer of votes or reduction or distribution of votes or any of those. It can be a simple slowing down of a device. I know that a particular constituency is going to be heavily going to favor another candidate. The simple thing that I need to do is that make the device slow. Let the machine, instead of taking 7 seconds or 1 minute to do a particular vote, let it take 2 minutes. By that simple act itself, I can manipulate a particular booth. The line would be large. The people would not come. The number of votes, instead of 800, it will come as 400. It's a very, because you at that point of time, you know which particular booth this EVM is going. That I find to be extremely alarming. Then what we have is known as mock polls, the 3-stage mock polls that can happen. So the candidate agnostic defense is gone. The randomization defense is gone. Both the randomization is done before the connection that happens. Then what happens is the mock poll, the 3-stage mock polls that we have. The first mock poll is done during the FLC, the first level check, which is again done much before. Just like I said, whatever happens before the physical connection is there, that symbol loading connection is there, it's irrelevant, because it is after that we are connecting this an external device. So what happened before, it shouldn't be of any point. So that mock poll and the FLC is now irrelevant. After this is connected, we have 2 mock polls. One is immediately after the commissioning, immediately after it is connected, where we take 5% of the EVMs and do a random 1000 vote cast. 1000 votes are cast, and we see whether. Now I used to think it was a very still it provided some check. But then I also read that the EVM also have, in fact, 2 things came notice. One was that if you look at a VVPAT slip, search for VVPAT slip on Google and find something which is a detailed thing, it will have something called as a session information, session 1, session 2, session 3. And it says every time you switch on and switch off, the VVPAT remembers the session. It's not like, if you switch it on and switch it off, it will become a new, completely a fresh thing. No. It remembers all the memory. It remembers all the candidate names, etc. And it also remembers the session as to whether it was first session or a second session, etc. That requires that it has an RTC or a real-time clock or something which is running on a BIOS, which it requires. Similarly, after the M2 version of the EVM, Commission itself says that every key press, that every time a particular button, any button is pressed, it is actually time and date stamped. means date and time information is available both with the as with the EVM as a whole. And if you have a date and time information available, and since you are connecting this external device after this knowledge that when is going to be the election, election is announced. Let's say I'm doing the commissioning today. Okay, that is May 23rd. I'm doing the commissioning. I'm connecting the external device, but I already know that the election date is maybe June 5th. Okay, the election date is June 5th. So I don't need to do anything on any other date other than June 5th. I don't have to do anything like that. With the date and time information available with the EVM and the session information available with the VVPAT, even this mock poll, we are only doing 5%. That itself is very inadequate. It is not even a 5% sampling, because it's a search for 5%, working 5%, not even a sampling for 5%. Then we are doing it at a time when you have the information as to when the election date is going to be, which booth this EVM is going, and what are the candidates at the sequence of it. Three key information is available at that point of time. So this mock poll is also rendered ineffective. It can be rendered, not I would say is rendered. It can be rendered ineffective with this information available. Now what we have is the on the day of mock poll that is there, that 50 vote thing. That was always a very weak link even before the VVPAT came in, because once you announce to everybody that first 50 votes are going to be tested or checked, it's a very simple, don't do anything for the first, if the count is less than 50 or count is more than 50, kind of a simple one-line code, which will be able to overcome that particular 50 thing. It will be able to overcome that check. The 50 vote mandatorily to be cast 50. You can put a buffer and make it 100 also, it doesn't matter. So the mock polls can be overcome. The randomizations are done before it is externally connected. Candidate information, it used to be unaware. Now we only upload it to the device, EVM. Physically, we only allow it to be connected to an external device. And technologically, it is no more a standalone calculator, which is connected to an external device, where we need to input data, information. And it has fairly advanced entire driver, everything that is there. And we have designed a VVPAT which is sitting in between a BU and a CU. So if you remember, when we started with this question of VVPAT, the first question was, if I am pressing a button on BU, I don't know what is getting registered in the control unit. That was the first issue. When we introduced VVPAT, now we know when I am pressing one, it is going to what is going to VVPAT. We know what is going to the VVPAT, but we still don't know what is going from VVPAT to the control unit, because the connection, we have remained exactly the same position. Our initial doubt was, we don't know what is getting registered in the CU. Even today, it is the same thing. We don't know what is getting registered in the CU. That is because of our design fault. The VVPAT was supposed to print what was getting registered in the CU. It was supposed to print what was getting registered in the CU. It was not supposed to register votes in the CU. The way we have placed our VVPAT in the design, now it is in between BU, then VVPAT and CU. Now VVPAT casts vote in the CU. It's even more dangerous, because VVPAT is exactly the one that is also printing the slip for the voter satisfaction. So VVPAT is casting the vote, and VVPAT is also showing the print to the voter. And it is the same VVPAT which is getting connected to an external device also. So now I don't need BU or CU. If I have a VVPAT, because if I am able to control the input to the CU, if I'm able to, and that is the one which is showing it to the voter also, that is the same thing which is showing it to the, which is getting connected to an external device also, that the way that we introduced it has seriously undermined the entire process, physical, technological security arguments that we had before the VVPAT was introduced. Now, that I'm not saying that I'm not arguing against the introduction of VVPAT. Why I'm saying, because this question of whether EVMs are hackable or not is a fairly established question in computer science, this I learned from after listening to Professor Subhashish Banerjee's lectures and maybe Sandeep Pandey of IIT Kanpur, Professor Subhashish Banerjee of IIT Delhi, etc., and also doing my own research, bit of it. The EVMs are hackable or not because it is now considered as an indeterminate kind of a problem, because there are so many stages, and since we can't verify, let's say let's assume any particular EVM is hacked before the VVPAT. How do we verify whether it was actually hacked or not? We don't know. Uh, the theoretical way to put is an undetectable change in the software should not lead to an undetectable change in the outcome. So if I am making some changes to, let's say, this Zoom session, the software that is running there, ideally that should be reflecting. Let's say I'm trying to put somebody else's voice or something like that, then you should be able to hear something. The outcome should also change. There should be detectable change in the outcome. But if there is no detectable change in the outcome, then it is very difficult to identify whether the software has been hacked or not, whether the device itself has been hacked or not. So let's say if there are 100 votes cast in an EVM, and the machine said, okay, instead of 50 to X and 50 to Y, I'm going to give 70 to X and 30 to Y. The machine did so. Now, how do you know? How do you verify whether 70-30 is the correct vote or whether 50-50 is the correct vote? How do you know it? You can't know. That was the first, the key issue, because it was not verifiable whether it is hacked or not hacked or anything. We were relying on our trust-based, process-based, custody chain-based arguments, that since we had checked everything before, we presume and assume that right now also it should be showing the correct thing. So that was the assumption behind it, presumption behind it. So in around 90s, I think a lot of paper came up in computer science, especially in electronic voting, which said there is no way we can check this in electronic voting without a paper trail that can be verified and audited. It has to be both verified and audited. Verified at the time of voting, individually verified by the voter, and audited at the time of counting, and it should be publicly auditable, publicly audited in presence of everybody. So VVPAT came as a solution to it. But the way we designed our VVPAT did not, and when they say verified, they made it very clear verifiability means active verifiability, or an agency involved with the voter to verify it. It shouldn't be the case that I pressed some button, I looked elsewhere, and something came and something went inside. You have no way to ensure that what has happened. Verifiability means if I'm able to press something, it came, say paper would have come. Either I should have a next level of agency wherein I say yes or no, yes, this is correct, okay, go ahead, yes, or no, yes, this is not correct, what I pressed was something, this has come as something else, I should be able to reject it. Or it should be coming out to me as a paper, I can decide, okay, this is what I did, okay, fine, go ahead, and I'm going to cast this vote in the VVPAT box. It could be many ways. I'm not saying these are the two ways. There could be many ways to ensure an active verifiability of that process of a VVPAT. But we did not design that. What we went for was a very passive verifiable design, wherein we said that we press something for 7 seconds, something would be shown, and then it will go down on its own. Whether you agree with it or not agree with it does not matter. It will fall on its own, and the vote will also be cast in the CU. Again, the way we designed it ensured that we don't know whether what is getting cast is actually what is getting printed. The same thing happened. Okay, I think I'm running out of time. I'll finish it in 5 minutes. Uh,
you are doing good, Kanan. Just go on as you find it interesting. I mean, we are finding it very interesting. No issue.
Okay, thank you. So what we did with the verifiability of the VVPAT was we went for a jugaad kind of a design. And I'll be using this entire current process of election as the jugaad process. Right now, what we are having is we said, okay, why to give, there could be complications, why to have another set of agency to be given. Instead, we'll just, we were so sure of our process-based security. We were 100% sure of that, our candidate agnostic nature, or the process security arguments, or technology safeguards and everything. We said VVPAT is just an additional thing. It's just because some people have these insane paranoia or doubts about EVMs. So we are adding this, and we are going to show you this. Okay, you see whether it's correct or not. And then let's say you see something else. You voted something, and the print came out as something else. Okay, let's say you noticed it. What do you have as an option? You can go to the presiding officer and ask for a test vote. Okay, Now, test vote means they would come, everybody would come, and in presence of everybody, you are allowed to cast again. You are allowed to cast again. It will be transparently done. And if the print is coming correct in front of everyone, then the government can penalize you, they can prosecute you, they can put a fine on you. Okay. So if let's say I saw a vote going as incorrect, I go to the presiding officer, they all come in their presence, I press again, and the vote comes correct, then the chance that I'll get punished, there is very high chance. The prosecution is given into the conduct rules itself. This is the commission is saying, we don't trust the voter, we trust the machine. Whereas no sane manipulation will be consecutive. Nobody would do every single vote to be manipulated. If any smart guy would do every 10th vote or a 20th vote or a 30th vote or any random number after vote, instead, if somebody doesn't want to manipulate, detect the pattern of manipulation also, you will do a randomized thing, any number between 10 and 20, once maybe 12, one maybe 13. So the second time, the consecutive time when I'm going to do this, even if it is manipulated, there is a very high chance that it will print the correct printout. Now, for that, the voter who raised this question can be penalized, can be punished, can be prosecuted. And it was his vote. He had a doubt whether it went correctly or not. So the machine was one part. Even the legal framework does not ensure verifiability. The machine does not allow verifiability, active verifiability. The legal framework actively discourages verifiability also, because it might punish you for questioning what was printed. And this test vote essentially allows us only to verify whether the consecutive or the second vote that is cast has been correct or not. It does not ensure us to verify whether the first one was correct or not. Never. So that verifiability is out of the window. So the first principle that was based for the introduction of VVPAT was verifiability. And verifiability meant active verifiability, wherein the voter had the agency to cancel vote without involvement of anybody if he or she finds it to be incorrect. That was the precondition for a verifiable design. Same thing came to the auditable part. So VVPAT is voter verifiable paper audit trail. So verifiability, we did a jugaad. Paper audit trail, when we come, that is the auditable part of it. We said initially that we will do only one per constituency. We will only audit one VVPAT per constituency. Why? Again, because we were sure of the pre-VVPAT arguments, defense for the EVM. Now we said we'll only do one. One would mean that the confidence level, let's say there are 200 polling booths in a constituency, 200 polling booths in a constituency, and there is one booth which has been manipulated. One booth has been manipulated for a very simplicity's sake. One booth has been manipulated, one in a constituency, assembly constituency. You are verifying only one. You are only taking one VVPAT to count with the match with the CU. And this is assuming that passive verifiability is acceptable. Even that is not acceptable. Without active proper verifiability, true verifiability, even 100% auditing of VVPAT and EVM will not yield any true result. Because if it is not checked at the time of voting, if it is not verified at the time of voting, auditing will not give us a solution. But let's assume the passive verifiability is itself satisfactory for us. Let's all come to that. Okay, passive verifiability is acceptable to us. Assuming that also, when we come here, we are doing, initially we did one. Now, when we do one, what is the chance of that getting caught? When we are manipulating, let's say, one booth, like in Bihar, there was a election which had 13 as the majority. There are many which are 100, 200, 300, many. Now, each EVM has around 1,000 votes cast. 800, 900, 1,000 votes cast. Let's assume only one booth has been targeted, particular, because you know which booth, which one is going. You know it has been manipulated. What is the confidence level if you're auditing only one? It's around 0.5%. There is a 99.5% chance, and if the majority is less than that particular thing, that we are not sure whether it is correct or not. Later, then we went to the Supreme Court. People asked for 50% of auditing, and the Supreme Court said, let's do 5. I don't know where these figures are coming from. Any scientific, any society which believes in maths or science would have gone for a scientific sampling. you would have said, okay, this hypergeometric distribution is there, where we should come by, this is the population size, and this is the confidence level that we require. Let's say we need a 99.9% confidence or a 99.99 confidence level. And if we want that, this is the sample size that we should arrive at, considering, the population and the confidence level. But we did not do any of that. We just said, okay, let's do 5 now. Instead of 1, let's do 5. Now let's take 5. If 5 is done in a 200 assembly constituency, we are having a confidence level less than 2.5%. That means, as a returning officer, you are signing off on a candidate as a representative of that particular constituency at a confidence level of less than 2.5% right now. We don't know, because that is the level of confidence level that has been given to us when we are checking only 5. And this is again, we have to be very clear that all the other arguments, the process arguments of EVMs, are now out of the window. Earlier, we were 100% relying on those arguments. Now, with the introduction of VVPAT, we are connecting an external device to the EVM after the candidates are known, after the election date is known, after the booth allocation is done. All 3 prior information is known at the time of connecting an external device to the EVM. So all those checks that the commission used to claim is now out of the window. The only checks that we have right now is the verifiability and the audit part, the individual verifiability and the public auditing that can be done along with the VVPAT. And here also, we did a jugaad at the verifiability part, and we are doing a jugaad again at the auditing part. It is beyond that, we also did a jugaad while designing the BU, VVPAT and CU design. As you remember, I said that VVPAT is sitting in between BU and CU. Why that happened is, my understanding is that because we wanted to reuse the existing BU and CU. Because BU had one single D-pin 9-pin cable, which is to go to the CU. So it was only able to connect to only each other. So you have 2 devices, 1 wire which is connecting between those 2 devices. Now what we had to bring in another device that is called a VVPAT. And when we do that, we need a third, another connection, another device to be connected there. How do we do that now? So what we did was that we removed like this, we kept a VVPAT in between and said, okay, let the BU connect to the VVPAT and let the VVPAT connect to the control unit. Now that was to again another jugaad, because we did as a design of the VVPAT jugaad. We did the what we call as a design, the whole architecture as a jugaad. We did the verifiability part of it as a jugaad, and we are doing the auditing part of it as also as jugaad. And I don't think that is the way we should be conducting elections. This has nothing to do with whether one party is trying to. I'm sorry, is it still connected or?
You're connected, Kannan.
You're good.
Go ahead. Some of us
Okay.
have gone off, it's showing, but you're connected. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, sorry. So this is again not a argument against EVM, against VVPAT, or saying against one party has hacked or the other party has hacked. No, this is about getting, elections are a very sovereign exercise of a nation, wherein actually the people, as citizens, we transfer our power to a few people, saying that, okay, you represent us. And that is one of the key processes in a democracy, that elections are not per se democracy, but one of the key part of a democracy wherein sovereignty is transferred and said that, okay, you can rule, you can take decisions on our behalf. And such a decision should not be based on jugaad designs. Such a process should not be based on jugaad processes. And it is not only a matter of internally one party or the other party. There are various agencies, various external agencies, factors which can come in and influence. This is also as much a national security issue, wherein during US elections people are talking, wherein influenced by Russia or China. When we are connecting devices to external devices, which are in turn connected to the internet or connected to elections commission server, we are not sure what can happen. The defense of it, and what makes it even more difficult is that the only way the commission can defend this is by saying, okay, this is the design of our EVM. This is the transparent design. This is of CU, of VVPAT, of BU, and it is not possible. The way the firmware is, the way. Should I start again?
No, good.
Go ahead. We can hear you, Colonel.
You are good. You are good, Kanan. Go ahead. You don't look at the chat box.
Sorry. So yeah. So what else? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah. So this is not a question of deciding, conspiracies about one elections being hacked by one party or the other party. It is about coming to a conscious decision as to what should be the integrity of the process through which we are transferring power. Our individuals sovereign to power to somebody to rule on our behalf, govern on our behalf, and that should be beyond doubt. And this is also a question of evolution of technology from one to the other, from multiple ballots for each candidate, each ballot, to single ballot, to EVMs versions from M1, M2, M3, to having VVPATs. So each and every time there have been questions raised and processes have changed. There is always a huge amount of resistance from the system. And that is because the moment it is said, but I think that is also because the way these processes are designed. I remember a conversation with Mr. Ram when you're saying you should give an alternative, you should give some suggestion as to what should be done. So my request was that these ad hoc suggestions and solutions that come in, like I say something, somebody else may say come in. And that is precisely how we have come up in such a stage where we have used somebody else's one part of the idea, somebody else's another part of idea, and we now are in a soup. What we should do is that at least in election processes, there should be a peer-reviewed process. There shouldn't be one committee, the same committee which designed, we have a technical expert committee, which designed the process is the one which will review also that process. If I have raised certain questions on the process of the election, it goes to the same people who designed this process. That is not how verification done. Even in a small software company, you have your testing team that is different from your design team, because it is precisely to ensure that it doesn't happen like that. The people who think that they have thought for every single solution is not the case. Otherwise, we should also be conscious of the fact that one of the most secure design that we used to think, our power grid or electricity grid, was recently found to be infiltrated by malware supposedly from China. And there were claims that that was what was responsible for a 6-hour power breakdown in Mumbai. So the defense to an existing design is, I'm not saying it should be argued. It should be argued if whatever I'm saying is wrong, it should be. But it shouldn't be from the point that, you are just raising doubts to create conspiracies. No. The argument is to improve, to find ways to improve, and to ensure that our process remain integral. Our processes, are immune to any kind of manipulation attempts by anybody, be it internal, be it external. It should remain that. And more importantly, I think Commission has to, with whole responsibility. I'm still not relieved as the Commission, the government has not accepted my resignation till now. So, but with full responsibility, I think Commission has misled the public in 2019, lied to the public, openly lied to the public in 2019 March, when the Chief Election Commissioner made in a statement, a press conference, said that EVMs are standalone machines not connected to any external device. This was a statement 2019 March. And there was a technical expert committee report that came in at that point of time, again, which was quoted by this Chief Election Commissioner, saying that VVPAT, CU and BU cannot talk to any other device other than itself. You can verify it right now and see whether these statements have been made in 2019 March, just before the Lok Sabha elections. And that was, I think, a willfully misleading the public and deliberately lying to the public, because we know that candidate name and symbols cannot be uploaded to these devices unless it is connected to an external device. We know it. How are we then saying that it is a standalone device, and that too close to such an election, 1 or 2 months before the election? It needs to come out of that attitude that since it has done something, it has to defend it no matter what cost. This is a process. And if at all we involve more people and get more questions at the time of designing itself, we make it more transparent, instead of the security through obscurity angle, that if it is secret, everything is secure. That is a principle that has been long discarded, the security through obscurity angle. Instead of that, it should embrace transparency. It should be honest with the public. And I honestly feel it should it should issue an apology to the public for misleading before 2019 election. I think that I'd stop my talk there, and we can go to the question and answer. I hope I finished in time. Yeah.
Thank you, Kannan. In the last 1 hour has been a fascinating lecture on inquiry and insight. Yeah, if I can say that. You've raised many questions, and I somehow think that this is basically the question is on the institutional mechanism to strengthen the institution, the absence of institutional mechanism. And I think this last 1 hour has been a very fascinating lecture. And I want to make a second comment before I shift to questions, that technological problems need technological solutions, not political solutions. And the questions you have raised are largely technology, engineering, of course, on the three pillars of transparency, verifiability, and secrecy. I think these three are constantly questioned. There are a host of questions. I mean, you can see the number of questions which are coming in, which shows the kind of interest people have. And I want to repeat here that the interest is apolitical. We are all genuinely interested in a safe election system. So the first question I have is, I know that in Europe, they tried this electronic voting machines, Netherlands, Germany, and they have rejected it. And they went back to paper ballots. Are we better than them, or we are solving the problems better than what the international experience?
Yeah, in fact, I think there was a German constitutional court judgment which very categorically said that elections are a democratic process. It is not a technological process, and it should not be dependent on few technocrats or few technologically advanced people to say that the elections are safe. Every individual is an equal stakeholder in that process, and every individual should be able to ascertain whether his or her vote has gone to the right person or not. So that verifiability by public at large was one of the key aspect of the German Constitutional Court's judgment that had come in, and that is effectively shut down an entire. In fact, now there are questions being asked again in Germany whether an entire rejection of a technological process is the right way to go. Initially, why do we need electronic voting? I think that is a more fundamental question. Is it for convenience? Is it for efficiency? Is it for correctness? Why do we need it? That is the first question. Then only we will be able to answer as to why particular countries have gone ahead and some of us have not gone ahead, and we are still going ahead with the electronic process. The electronic voting, I think, should be about correctness and not about efficiency or as convenience. Because ballot paper had certain issues, certain concerns earlier, and we had those issues. Let's say somebody had stuffed ballot into it, or some booth capturing had happened. With ballot stuffing is less of an issue after EVM, but booth capturing can happen anywhere. Even now, it's the same thing. But after that, how do you verify whether there has been no reduction in the votes or there has been no addition of the votes? There is no reduction or addition of the vote that has happened, and the vote has been cast for X has also gone only for X only. So that is the design of the correctness of election process. Electronic voting was supposed to give more credibility to that correctness part. It was not a convenience based elections. But unfortunately for us, we took elections because EVMs to a large extent made elections a little more convenient for the election machinery. Because otherwise it was a huge exercise of having ballot boxes, papers, and then counting. It was a huge exercise which was really difficult on the administrative machinery. So EVMs gave in that sort of a convenience, but it did not add to any of the correctness angle of it. The correctness angle was there only for a small part of it, wherein which we said that it takes 1 or 2 minutes for each vote to be cast. So massive ballot stuffing is not possible. You can't just put 100 votes at a single time. It will take some time. It's not that ballot stuffing still can't happen. It can happen in an hour. They may be able to 50, 60, 100, something will be able to do. But a massive ballot stuffing is not possible. So it added a bit of to the correctness angle, and it added to a large extent to the convenience angle. And so we went ahead with that. And that attitude is very clear even now when we say that our election process can have 8 phases. Our election can be spread over 1.5 months. no problem. But our counting, we are not ready to do any auditing of the paper audit, saying that if we do that, it might take a day. Instead of 1 day, it might take 2 days for the counting process to be over. Why? If you're focused on correctness of election, we should be completely okay with it even taking 2 days, because our process of election already took 1.5 months. It hardly matters if it is one more day that is coming in, if it is correctness. But if it is convenience or the speed or the the efficiency, like we are able to announce elections within 24 hours of the counting starts, then yes, we need to go with this. But I don't think a candidate getting elected half a day early is going to make any difference to that constituency. But a wrong candidate getting elected will make a whole lot of difference to the constituency. You know, how it doesn't matter. You got elected, you got your certificate as an MLA or an MP in the morning, or you got an MLA or MP in the evening. What difference does it make to the people or to the candidate? Nothing, nothing at all. But if a wrong candidate is elected, it makes a whole lot of difference to everything. So if you are focusing on the correctness angle, yes. And electronic voting machines was actually had brought in as part of a correctness, not as convenience. And when it is, a lot of the European nations also went ahead and started using it as a network. You can vote from anywhere. You can, so they had a different kind of designs also. It was network. So the German judgment, Constitutional Court judgment, became a sort of a benchmark which used was across the countries in saying that this is not the way to go, and ballot paper is the way to go. And they were not also maybe facing that kind of ballot stuffing or booth capturing kind of issues that was seeing earlier. Whereas in our country, booth capturing would remain the same irrespective of EVM or ballot box, because booth capturing is a physical capturing of the booth, wherein 5 people, 10 people are able to or whatever the security, and then they take over the process. So anybody can come, and you will see many videos also. Somebody is coming, but the vote is cast by polling agent which is there. So instead of putting the paper there, the person is going and casting that vote on the EVM. So booth capturing is not an issue. Ballot stuffing, the chance of it has come down from a mass level to a slightly lesser level. But if you look at with the, now we have webcams and CCTVs and everything kept everywhere. We have micro observers in sensitive booths. We have paramilitary, central paramilitary forces deployed in various booths. The chances of a booth capturing or a ballot stuffing happening, even if we move to ballot paper, are much more reduced now, much lesser now. So the argument also moving back to ballot paper is accompanied with the moving back to ballot stuffing and booth capturing might not also hold true. Technology wise, we always said ours is a rudimentary device, unlike the devices used by the in the US or in the European nations, standalone rudimentary device. So their concerns are not same as our concerns. That has always been our defense, which is no more the case. Now we also have the same connected device, which we are connecting to an external device, and also that connected to the outside device. Whether we should go to ballot paper or a technologically better option is something that we all need to come together and discuss it. I'm not expressing my opinion right now. I think Commission should invite various views on it, and then that might be a particular the right forum for to discuss this. But the current process is highly vulnerable.
Kannan, I repeat what Vikram said. This was an absolutely enlightening 1 hour that we spent with you, listening to you. I don't even know which are the issues to ask you questions on, because you raised some very, very fundamental and very, very specific issues which stand to reason, and which raise some very important questions. So I'll touch upon a few things, and then Ram and others will also ask some questions. My first question is, in America, the entire election process is very decentralized. There is not even one central election commissioner that's managing it. Each state has its own election processes. There is a huge amount of volunteer engagement that happens in America. Citizens are involved in the election process, and the transparency that results, and then there is paper ballots, right? Why is it that America continues to do that and not move to EVMs for more convenience? Or is it that there is a fundamental systemic support that America has towards transparency and towards legitimacy of a process than what we have here.
Yeah, I think because of the decentralized process there, I think you will find electronic voting also happening in some places, and ballot-based pure ballot, and then mix of ballot, and this, all sort of combinations happening in the US. But yes, transparency wise, even when the electronic voting machine is used, you will find some peer reviewed, the design to be published in a paper, and you will be able to verify whether what is happening there. So whereas if we have to look at anybody, that what is our EVM design, nobody knows. It is known only to a few people. So we are sort of so that security through obscurity principle, and also trust based process. You trust your district magistrate, or you trust your SDM or a returning officer, you trust the chief election commissioner. So the trust, it's not very, it is not trust and verify, it is just trust. And it is not even transparency, it is trust. You have to trust, you don't have an option. Are you challenging the election commission? Are you challenging the views of a Supreme Court? Are you challenging, if you ask a doubt to an institution which is sufficiently supposed to be above and respected, the first question that is asked is taken as a challenge to an institution which is there. I think probably that has to do with our institutional framework of governance, which is, I remember today there was a case of some bureaucrat slapping a teenager that was going viral in one of the states, a district magistrate. And most of the questions that I get on Twitter are like exactly this, that can he slap, or we don't know what happened before, but isn't slapping bad? Means, can a DM slap somebody? So we are still not sure whether nobody can slap anybody, be it a police one, be it a DM, be it anybody. But we still assume that people in power are to be trusted, and their actions are to be justified without questioning, without taking doubt. I think that is not the case in a lot of other countries. That way we are a little more hierarchical. We are a little more, again, our society is also trust based and hierarchical based. Somebody from the top has said this is right, yes, this is right. So that's what initially I said. Ours is a completely trust-based election. Nobody can say that I challenge, I need to see everything. And even if that is a challenge, it is seen as a convenience. If a candidate is coming and saying, I need 100% of the paper audit trail to be audited, ideally it should be done, immediately done, because he is contesting an election. We should be able to satisfy it to him. And election is a process, as somebody was writing, that is a process wherein you convince the lost candidate. It is not about selecting the winning candidate also. It is also about convincing the candidate who lost, saying that the process was fair. And when we don't invest in that, what happens is, over a period of time, it is not the trust in the EVMs that get eroded. It is a trust in the institution that gets eroded. And it is the trust in the election itself that gets eroded. And once that trust is eroded, it's very difficult to gain it back. Now, right now, it is just a question about a process, whether it should be changed or not. But when an institution tries to, not address it, rather than it tries to do sort of obscure it again, then the institution becomes becomes questionable. Then the process that they have been is questionable. So I think we as a society also has to do to be a lot more questioning, demand a lot more transparency. In fact, especially at least during elections, because that is one process where we transfer our power. There we should definitely be demanding more transparency from the institution, and we shouldn't be going for a blind trust-based model when it comes to it.
Ram, will you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah. No, I didn't. Well, if you want me to ask question, why, Kannan, you often said, and you've said in this talk also, that it is wrong for you to give suggestions, because the problem now is that every other person is giving suggestions. So what is happening? Finally, things are being put together. The last observation that, to build trust in the institution, how does the public, the voter, the citizen, how can she work to make the election commission open itself to self-questioning and to rebuild trust? Can that be done, or do we have to depend on the political parties to put pressure on the commission? or the government in power to give a direction to the election commission, if that at all is possible. How does the ordinary citizen, because right now, for a variety of reasons, there is a sense of, yes, even earlier when the ballot paper was used, we knew that in some parts of the country, the elections were rigged, with ballot stuffing, etc. But now there is a lot of disquiet about the process. What can the voter, the citizen do to rebuild trust?
Yeah, I think I have been in talk with a lot of political parties, very top leadership of the political parties, and also with various bureaucrats, uh, trying to argue or trying to convince them that they should raise these questions. But what I have observed is that a lot of it becomes a result based concern. So if the if a particular party finds the election result to be on their side, okay, we'll not raise this question now because it is it is in our favor. And when it changes, when they lose that election, another election, then suddenly the same thing becomes another big concern. So this is, I think we are unable to distinguish between result-based concern and a process-based concern. Like somebody was saying that if I am saying in a particular room a door is open or a window is open, all that I have to show is that the window is open, right? Please close it. There is a chance that the door is open. Somebody might go in. Whereas if I have to prove that something has already been stolen, then only I can say that the door is open. That is the level of discourse that is now happening. One is result based. So one is saying that I have to show that something has been stolen from the house, then only I can say the door was open. The other is a process based concern. I am looking at it and saying that, see, the door is open. I think there is a chance that there can be an entry through that door. It's better to close that door. I shouldn't have to wait for a result. I shouldn't have to wait for a theft to happen to say that the door should be closed. These two concerns are, I am also finding it difficult, because every time I put this argument out, the first thing is that you did not raise it when that happened, you did not raise it then this happened, that whataboutery also comes in. So yes, first is to keep it in one's mind as a first step, that this is not to do with results may go in any way. You don't know whichever way it might go. But and it is not really necessary that elections are hacked. It may be that none of the elections are hacked or none of the elections are manipulated. Irrelevant of that, irrespective of that, if there are concerns in the process, if you are not satisfied of the security of the process, integrity of the process, then it should be questioned. The first part. And political parties also, I am trying to convince the same thing. I think all of you might also be in influential positions to raise these specific issues with the political parties, so that it can be a lot of a concerted campaign. The other part is that to raise very specific questions to the election commission, to the district magistrates, to the election machinery at every level, because elections are not conducted in the national level. Elections are conducted in the constituencies by the SDMs and by the DMs, and it is that level. So asking these very 2-3 simple questions: is or are EVMs standalone anymore? If they are standalone and not connected, how are the names and symbols uploaded to it? 2, is this programmable or memory? If it is not, then where and when is the name and symbols uploaded? 3, what is the confidence level of signing off on a candidate if there is, let's say, a margin is less than 1,000 votes with the current process? These are very, very simple to answer questions, and it won't require, and I'm sure a commission will have to answer in one way or the other. The moment it answers it in one way or the other, I think that next step would be natural, because the moment they say it is not standalone, it is connected to an SLU, it is connected to a laptop, it has to address it. The immediate step is, once it acknowledges, it has to address it. Second step, it has a memory where external names are added, it has to address it. The moment it says my confidence level is 2.5% or less than 2.5%, it has to address that part. So the first part is to understand and identify the right questions to ask. And once we know the right questions to ask, then to ask these questions to right authorities. And if that doesn't also happen, many people are saying that we should go to the court and convey it. I have found out that unless there is sufficient public opinion on an issue, going to the court, especially on questioning election commission and election, because so judiciary is also slightly reluctant to interfere in matter which is, you know, under that constitutionally under that comes as election commission. So they try to take a hands-off approach to it. But once there is a public opinion built on these specific questions, I think these questions should also be taken to the court, and the court should also be asked to answer these questions as to, because commission has filed an affidavit saying that these are standalone, unconnected, all these things, and that has been blatant. I don't know. It is my own institution. I used to take pride in, you know, I used to really take pride in the fact of being part of election machinery, being an IAS officer. You know, that is we can't blame politicians. We can't blame anybody else. It is us. You know, but this obstinate defense and first thing I did was I wrote a letter to the commission. You know, it was before even going to the public or any. So first thing I wrote it because these were concerns, and the and the reply was that your constituency had only 300 polling booths. You are a returning officer of a small constituency, not a big constituency. How should it matter whether I was of a big constituency or a wrong small constituency? So there is a huge defense, obstinate kind of a attitude from the commission, not openness to it. But thankfully, I would say that the article that was written in India Forum, that has created quite a lot of interest, at least in the bureaucracy circle. I got a lot of inputs from the bureaucracy saying that these questions are valid because they also understand that it cannot be answered. And so I think, yeah, building public opinion by asking the right questions is the way forward. And at some point, yes, moving to the court. If you're asking about larger institutional responsibility from the election commission, I think that's a different topic altogether. Much larger.
I think you've already answered the larger responsibility when you actually specifically accuse the election commission of willfully lying in a press conference. But having said that, I think here, if you talk about the purity of the process, I think that's what you're questioning, saying that the process is not pure. But you have not still told us that have the flaws in the process resulted in manipulation and hacking? No, or would you take a line saying that no, because I don't know whether it is being hacked or not? Is that the response? I just want your response.
Yeah, of course. See, when you are saying something, if you don't have the proof of saying that, so I only have the proof that the door is open. I don't have the proof that something has been stolen. So there is no point for me in arguing that something has been stolen or something has been taken out. There are many who say that based on their own assessments of a particular booth analysis or a constituency analysis or whichever. My point is very simple. I cannot say that it has been hacked. That will be highly irresponsible of me to say that it has been manipulated or it has been hacked. And the same way, it will be irresponsible for me to say that it cannot be hacked or it cannot be manipulated, because there are sufficient flaws wherein I don't know, which is left open, you know, which is left vulnerable in a way that has not been addressed. So both way, I think, so yeah, I think you have answered my part of the question also. My response is exactly that.
Yeah.
The character of the election commission transformed over a period of time. What was the turning point when it stopped being a completely independent institution and started acting as an extension of the executive?
It will be historically, I don't know whether it was always like this, because we all comment based on a particular time frame that we are in. So right now, maybe my experience has been with around 2012 to 19, when I was in maybe another 2 years now. But yeah, particularly disturbing was the way, I think, you know, we have sufficiently even now not questioned the chief election commissioner, who's supposed to be the right now chief election commissioner, was hounded out of the commission, Mr. Ashok Lavasa.
Yeah,
he was hounded out, and you know that he's now in. I had my meetings with sir also, but I would refrain from speaking on that. But he particularly was, imagine, during the Bengal elections, later phases of the Bengal elections or the UP elections, and this was a person who was with the government of India as finance secretary, I'm pretty sure that they must have done their due diligence and vigilance and everything before appointing an officer as a finance secretary, because otherwise it's again on this government, this very government. The same government appointed after his retirement as a election commissioner, of course after all the IB and vigilance and all the checks that was done. And then during 2019 elections, in a couple of incidents where he recorded his opinion as different from that of the other two, immediately after that, his family was hounded left, right, and center. You know, that is, I don't remember, because my history, like my own experiences of this thing is also very limited. But I don't remember something happening that a government going after the family of a constitutional position, of a person who is occupying a constitutional position, going after the family, daughter, son, wife, sister, everybody, and saying that these are all the issues. And then the same government recommended him to be the vice president representing India in the ADB. You know, the same government which was accusing him and his family of XYZ, all those financial something, and the government, very same government, recommended him, if provided he moves out of the commission and he moves to the ADB. So I had that particular one incident comes to me because I also had my interaction with him, and that I found to be unacceptable. And he should have been the chief election commissioner. So when you push out individuals who otherwise take an independent stand on any issue, you may like it, dislike it, is a different thing, then it reduces the credibility of the institution again. And so again, right now we have a chief election commissioner who might not have conducted elections in his entire career. So again, how much of that understanding would be there, we don't know. But yeah, I would say that progress is about improving from what is today. You know, like there could have been much worse period before, I don't know about, but I shouldn't be cared about it, and I shouldn't bother about it, because some people fought then, that is how we came today. And if our efforts are not to improve from what is today, saying that yesterday was worse than today, then there is no point. Tomorrow has to be better than today, and if tomorrow has to be better than today, you have to question what is today, irrespective of whatever yesterday was.
I'll ask one supplementary question before Vikram gets on to the next one. You mentioned some critical components of an independent election process. How well are these recognized? Where are they written? How was it as an acceptable, non-negotiable set of principles? Like you said, unconnected, and all the 3 or 4 that you mentioned. How do you make sure that where is it? Is it written somewhere, or is it a matter of convention, or is it a matter of understanding, or is it at the discretion of the commission itself to decide year after year or month after month to change its standing?
Yeah, see, the standalone, unconnected, etc., was not a theoretically accepted position on, especially from a computer science perspective. Those are actually conventions and ways of convincing a public, I would say. The best way to convince, I think, that one single line, that EVMs are like a standalone, unconnected calculator, that convinces a lot more population than any other theory that could be out there, because people understand a calculator not being able to be hacked. So standalone, etc., the process security, the administrative safeguard, these are all defenses and arguments and methods which the commission devised over a period of time to ensure that these. But whereas if you're talking about the verifiability part or the VVPAT so these are actually published in peer-reviewed journals. So electronic voting is also a fairly developed field in computer science. And there are many various published papers on it. Understanding about Indian EVMs also, on how ideal other EVMs should be. All these are published in peer-reviewed journals. And even many of the electronic voting machines that are used in US, for that matter, they have their entire articles published in a lot of papers, and which are reviewed and criticized, and various other new versions come in. So it is a transparent learning process through which they have come to a particular thing for us. But for what we are having right now, it's an obscure process. We don't know what is inside. So it is quite possible that despite all these flaws, the EVMs are absolutely not hackable. Okay, it is very well possible, but we don't know, because, and it is also possible that it is very well hackable. Also, we don't know, because it is a black box. Nobody has come out and said this is what. And the commission's way of doing a challenge, like, didn't we do a hackathon in 2017? Why didn't you come and hack and prove it? Kind of a thing. Hackathons, 2017 hackathon was also, I would abruptly, briefly comment on it, say, because it was actually, they did not give any physical access to the EVM. It was kept at a far distance far. Whereas after the introduction of VVPAT, the physical connection actually is everywhere it is done. First was that. Second was that for a hackathon, certain at least information should be made out in the public. Certain design, certain transparency should be involved. There was no transparency. There was no accessibility. There was no transparency. Some EVMs are kept at a different distance, and then they were asked, okay, now you go and hack it. So this was more of a challenge. And in fact, you should think the other way. Let's assume a political party knows to hack it. Do you think any smart political party would go and show that they can hack it? They would be fools to go and show that it can be hacked. If it is a, so the hackathon challenge by principle itself was a counter, intuitive kind of a thing. Nobody who can otherwise hack it properly would go to a public hackathon challenge and show that I can hack it. When that is a tool way through which I can influence an entire election, why would I do it through that? No, that shouldn't be the way to get it done. It should be get it done by making, people come out, make it transparent, let individuals, there are a lot of good, well-wishers, kind of any technologists, technocrats who would like to get involved in this process, like you said in the US, where volunteers and citizens become part of that process, and that way, little more trust can be built on this process per se. Otherwise, electronic voting is a fairly evolved field in computer science. A lot of papers you would find, a lot of research papers, principles, etc. you would find in computer science papers, articles.
Are you saying that the introduction of VVPAT has actually weakened the process? I mean, they could have thought of something else, because most of your concern seems to be on how VVPAT is interacting with the central unit. Suppose it had been in parallel instead of in series, would it have helped? Or instead of VVPAT, suppose it had been more transparent, that would have helped the process. What is your opinion on that?
No, VVPAT was a required addition. There is no doubt in that, because as I said, pre-VVPAT EVMs depended a lot on trust-based voting, on custody chain, in the sense it was always with secure environment, and also processed verification, pre-voting process verification, mock polls, randomization, etc. But there was a key concern was that whether it can be hacked or not was still not possible, because we don't know whether the outcome has been changed or not. It is difficult for us to know if the EVM is saying there are 100 votes for X and 200 for another. We have to just believe it. There is no way we can say that no, it has been hacked. It's not possible for us to do that. So that is why the VVPAT came in for two reasons. One is it gives the voter the chance to verify that, okay, what I pressed was exactly what has been printed. And also, if it is audited with what is recorded in the EVM at the later stage, then the whole process gets connected. Cast as intended, recorded as cast, and counted as recorded. The whole thing becomes connected. The way we introduced VVPAT became a big issue. So first of all, it is incorrect. I think it will be incorrect to even call what we introduced as VVPAT. VVPAT means, in that term, it should be verifiable and it should be audited. Both these things are very important. What we introduced was a Jugaad kind of a VVPAT, wherein instead of meeting the verifiability requirement, we made a passive verifiability design, a Jugaad design. Instead of registering what was, or printing what was registered in the VVPAT in the control unit, we made the design again a Jugaad by keeping the VVPAT in between, because we wanted to use both CU and BU to be used, the previous BUs and CUs to be used. And we did a Jugaad again in the auditing part. So the first thing is, if you have to do it, redesign the VVPAT so that there is an active agency involved in the verifiable part. It's again a suggestion which I thought I shouldn't be saying. So that is one way to go about it, so that there is an active verifiability involved. Okay. And active verifiability through a vote coming to me, or maybe yes or no thing that I can do. An agency should be involved with the voter to say that yes, X is correct or Y is correct. Then at the same time, there has to be an auditing component that should come in, which is at least statistically significant. It cannot be 1 or 5. And elections are standalone processes. Again, what we did was that we took a sampling. When we took a population size to come at a sampling, we took the population size of entire Lok Sabha constituencies, the entire 543 constituencies, and the polling booths, around 10 lakh polling booths there, as a single population size. And then we came at a sample. Whereas elections are actually to each constituency. Elections are an independent event in each constituency. So the population size should have been the number of polling booths in that particular constituency, instead of taking the whole thing, because tomorrow there can be a bipole to a particular constituency, and that will not accompany with a entire 10 lakh polling booth as a population. It will only be having those 250 booths as the population size. So if the principle of coming to a sample size should be held irrespective of whether it is a Lok Sabha election or a legislative election or a bipole, it shouldn't matter, because the coming to a sample size for auditing should have held in all these terms, irrespective of which election it is. And then coming to the sample size based on the confidence level. That is how we should have come. If we do that, yes, I think we will be able to verify. If you're able to verify at the time of voting with active agency, and we are able to audit publicly with adequate statistically significant sample, I think the process is, at least to my mind, okay. But it need not be okay for many others. Some might say it should be 100%. Statistically significant is not good enough for me. Let's say there is a margin of 13 votes. And what is the chance now that you are doing only 40% and then you come to know? So there could be more arguments. That is why I'm a little reluctant to give a precise, let's do this and get it solved kind of an answer. But if you do this, at least we should adhere to the principles of VVPAT. If that much we do, I think we'll have a better process.
Well, one of the issues I have is, which I find is very disturbing, is that in this process, the booth voting patterns are known. And is it possible technologically to mix up votes like how they used to?
For that, again, we will have to, that is actually randomization or randomizer was something that was discussed for a good time. And I think this is a very serious concern. It is not a minor concern. This booth, the winning candidate or the parties knowing, this is a very, very serious concern, especially having conducted elections. And we know the repercussions that happen after the elections.
Not only that, because the way I distribute toddy and money, I'll change it next time.
It becomes even vindictive. It's not even becomes vindictive when government comes in power. We'll show you. Okay, you tried to do this. Now we will show you. Now we are in power. We'll show you. So that how dare you did this kind of a thing comes in, and it is so very evident, and that is dangerous for a democracy. That has been one major step that we missed, and we have not been able to solve. I think this, we call it secrecy of vote. I think it is more to do with privacy of vote, rather than the secrecy. It is the privacy part of it. The voter doesn't want his vote to be, known to somebody else. And for that to be ensured, the randomizer was one of the things that was suggested. But randomizer would again mean some kind of an electronic network being connected with all these CUs, and because it will have to be brought together and some randomization to be done there, which again was that it is not connected. It is not it is a standalone device kind of a thing which was brought in. Now that anyway we have a connected VVPAT, and if you are going to meet again, this is off the cuff solutions. I'm just throwing out things which we shouldn't be doing this. But if now that we are connecting VVPAT to an external device, I think that concern is sort of already thrown out. And if you are designing a properly verified VVPAT and a sufficient auditing of those papers, I think mixing and connecting would not be the concern. We should be able to redesign our EVMs like that, wherein the randomization, and after the randomization, where the VVPAT slips are also in a way randomized and verified, we should be able to do. But you might not be aware, forget about the booth level information. EVMs are able to provide you sequential printouts. If you ask anybody from a, which vote went to whom is also known. It might not be known to at the time of counting, but somebody wants to take out a sequential printout, that is possible. But we have not communicated to the outside world that it is possible to do that. I can do it with the EVM, connect a small printer and then get it out. First vote went to X, second vote went to Y, third vote, it is known. It is already recorded in the EVM. So yeah, booth level is a very, very serious concern. I agree. We need to find a solution to that as well.
Ram, do you have a question before we close?
No question. Just thank you, Kannan. I mean, the questions that you have raised are very worrying, but I think we can't sweep them under the carpet. We have to pose these questions. As I said, put public pressure on the election commission, on political parties. As you said, the political parties' approach, unfortunately, is result-oriented. And before the Bengal elections, TMC and various supporters were saying EVMs, EVMs, EVMs.
Yeah.
And after that, there's been not a squeak through. So I think what we should think about is how to raise these issues and how to keep putting pressure so that, it is our vote, it is our sacred, it is.
But I have a fundamental issue. And my issue is none of the institutions, not the election commission, considers itself answerable to people or to anyone who raises a question. How do we make them even look at the issues that you have raised? And they are so true and so valid that any right-thinking institution should be looking at these things. How do we make them do that?
No, we'll do it. It's just a matter of things change with. It's just more and more people would get connected, and I think public pressure is always something that has an impact.
Before Ajay closes, I just want to say something that before this lecture, before you listening to you, I used to have unfounded bias, saying that there's something wrong with the system, but I don't know what. I must thank you for telling me what is wrong with the system.
Potentially wrong with the system.
Suspicion on the system, then, but you have no basis because we don't do work on this. And this is the remarkable work on it. And I also beginning to think that while there are flaws in the system, the very fact that broadly the election results seem to be reflecting the mood of the people. It is not a great mind hacking the whole thing. It has many, many small things that needs to be done to improve the system.
A friend wants me to ask this one question before we close. And his question reads like this. Till 2018, Bangladesh used to cast paper ballot in a transparent plastic ballot box. Then at the end of the election day, the ballots were counted at the booth itself, with many local voters watching the count through the windows. I was a witness to this a decade ago. Does this system have any value in India today?
No.
We were just discussing, I think, these in many places, like even in US, I think this privacy of a vote is not of much of a concern. There are registered voters of this say, and they will proudly even say that we are registered for Republican, but we vote for Democratic this time, or something like that. There is a concept of that coming into a large extent. For us, I think, because as you said, the power relations are huge. The power differentials of being a citizen and being in government, being in some way connected to the government, the power differentials between these two set of individuals are huge. And it is in that environment where the transfer of sovereignty or the transfer of power from the voter to becomes a sacred exercise, not only a sacred exercise, but also very private exercise in India. I hope, ideally it shouldn't matter. Anybody should be able to come and say, this is what I voted for. Why should I be ashamed of I voted for X or Y, or why should I be worried about that also? So booth level voting had that concern, and I think, maybe, but I haven't studied the Bangladesh model per se, so it may be premature for me to comment authoritatively on that. Maybe I'll also go through it and comment later.